Welcome along to talkSPORT Rugby. Thanks once again for joining us for the conclusion of the Six Nations. France are the champions. They got the job done against Scotland, ending England's hope of lifting the trophy in Wales. I'm Alfie Reynolds, talkSPORT reporter, joined once again by Tim Cocker from Egg Chasers Rugby. Tim, how you doing?
Very well, Alfie. Slightly smug after the weekend as well, I'll confess.
You must have had a dream Super Saturday, didn't you? In front of the sofa, feet up, back-to-back games, just loving all the rugby?
Well, yeah, still jealous of you being in Cardiff to witness that.
Yeah, well, we'll get onto that extraordinary game in Cardiff. Also joining us once again this week is the former England second row, the World Cup winner, Ben Kay. Ben, how you doing?
Hi, Alfie. Yeah, good, thank you. Yeah, I had a slightly different experience. I watched the game 72 floors up outside at the top of the Shard, which was a pretty mental experience, but quite a fun way to watch a game of rugby.
Yeah, not the way that you maybe thought your championship would be concluding, but sounds like good fun.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, it was. I probably enjoyed the hospitality a bit more than if I'd been commentating. So.
I can't blame you for that. Look, lads, we're going to get into all the games. France as the champions. We're going to go through some of our awards for the Six Nations, as well as doing a report for each team to kind of summarise their Six Nations as a whole. Kind of top line before we get into it. Tim, what's your kind of thoughts on this Six Nations overall in terms of an absolute classic to the other end of the scale? What do you make of it?
Well, really, really entertaining. It was in the extremes, wasn't it? Because I still can't make up my mind how good or not Ireland are, England are. Are France actually tracking to be up there with South Africa come the next World Cup? If anything, this has just got me hungry now to want to see these Northern Hemisphere teams in the Six Nations match up against the South at the end of this year to see where they really are. But loads of entertainment.
Yeah, Ben, outside of enjoying things at the Shard, you're obviously at a lot of the games as well. It feels like it was classic Six Nations in a lot of respects in terms of upsets and some really good games. What was kind of your overall feel on the championship?
Yeah, I think a lot of the turning points for teams, without sort of wanting to sound negative, were mistakes at key moments, and you know, I think sort of Scotland will be devastated with their performance this year. They would have had so much hopes going in, and the mistakes that they made against England, I think, came back to haunt them. France's mistakes stopping them again against England in that first half, which has stopped them getting the Grand Slam. So, but in terms of sort of drama and entertainment, we had a bit of everything, didn't we? So on the whole, I think the Six Nations Committee will be pretty happy with it.
Yeah, drama and entertainment as well on the final weekend. Let's start off in Cardiff. I was at this game and just like an utterly extraordinary scoreline. For me, it was best summed up when England scored that final try, and as they were lining up the conversion, it was Swing Low just being sung all around the Principality. Half the stadium was empty, and I was there thinking it's the first ever Wales-England game I've been to in Cardiff, and I was like, I've been watching on TV for years. England teams go there and struggle. Even when Wales haven't been that good, it's a really tight game. And I've just watched an England team absolutely blitz the Welsh in their own backyard. I mean, Ben, it feels like England have been waiting for that sort of performance. I'm just not quite sure we expected it in that manner away against Wales in Cardiff.
Yeah, I think there's been so much talent on show in the Premiership, and we've been waiting to see that come alive on the international stage for England, and you know, I think Steve Borthwick's had his critics about his style of rugby, and I'm not sure that actually it was always, you know, let's go out and play like this. I just think they weren't playing to what they trained in the week leading up to, particularly that Scotland game, the week leading up to the fixture. So to finally start to get some momentum is brilliant for England, and I think, you know, we mentioned it. They were lucky against France with the drop passes. They were lucky with Finn Russell's missed kicks against Scotland. But in 2 years' time, if England are where they want to be in 2 years' time, no one will remember that. They'll just see the results, and England will have that confidence. The Italy game was a step up in terms of their performance, but then I think all English people, with how things have gone over the last couple of years, were a bit worried about the boys going to Cardiff and what sort of backlash against a team with nothing really to lose from the position they were in and what's happened in the past down there, and for them to not only win easily but win so comprehensively and keep the foot on the throat, it is a big confidence boost for the players. I guess the big problem for England now is it's a Lions year, and so the next time they'll get together properly with all their players available won't be until the autumn, and you almost want to grasp that momentum. But the standard of performance and some of the rugby was outstanding, exactly what England needed. A few of the critics now might give them a little bit more slack, and that's sport, isn't it? You just sometimes need a couple of lucky breaks to kickstart something, and then you can go on a decent run.
Tim, do you think it's the best performance of the Steve Borthwick era for England? I guess the Ireland game, isn't it, in the Six Nations is the
Ireland
other one.
last year. Yeah. I mean, it's up there, isn't it? And rugby isn't easy. In some respects, it's very complicated, but it is simple. If you can physically dominate your opponent, everything else becomes a lot easier to do. And England just absolutely dominated Wales. And I was at the same time just like, yes, this is awesome to watch as an England fan. I did at the same time feel a bit sorry for those Welsh players and the fans. But then I was sort of thinking, hold on a minute, 2013, 2015 Rugby World Cup. Ben would remember 2005. I'm sure you didn't get an ounce of sympathy that night when you lost 11-9, Ben.
Not much. No.
So I thoroughly enjoyed that, whilst recognising the effort that the Welsh players were putting in and feeling bad for where they are, because the Six Nations and World Rugby needs a strong Wales. Did enjoy it.
I think there's going to be a lot of England fans.
Sorry, Alfie, just on that as well. Like, England fans loving it this weekend. But I'll tell you what, they'll only love it for one or two games if that happens, because you want your biggest rivals there. It's a bit, as a Leicester player, I remember all the Leicester fans celebrating Northampton getting relegated until they realised they wouldn't have a derby next year. And it's that sort of feeling that the big game is to go to Cardiff or to play against Wales. You don't want that to become the easy rollover, and I think there's a lot of people in Wales at the moment that are fearing that, particularly with the structure of the union so much up in the air. No one's sure about who's going to come in to coach, whether there are going to be the same number of regions as they've got now. So it's a really challenging time for Wales, and as an Englishman, although I want us to win every year, I don't want Wales to completely collapse.
Yeah, my brother messaged me over the weekend saying it confirmed what I've felt for a long time, that you can't beat Wales too much at rugby. But I agree with you, Ben, that it is one of those that almost a little bit what happened with the Wallabies for a long time. And we hope they've turned a corner after how we saw them perform in November, but where for a long time people almost became apathetic towards watching the Wallabies play, both in Australia and when they'd come overseas and tour here. And you wonder with Wales, don't you, I suppose that to put one positive spin on this result is they can't paper over the cracks. And I don't think they would have done anyway, would they, given the fact that it's, 17 defeats in a row and all the bad and negative and record-breaking for all the wrong reasons statistics that this team is going through. But if there is one thing that result will underpin, it's that they need change, don't they? They need change, and they need pretty drastic change to be able to correct this. Yeah,
they do. It's the national sport. Or it was the national sport. I'm not sure it is now, and that's a big concern. And part of that, the professional era hasn't helped Welsh rugby, partly because the commercial realities, and it's probably an easier game to get big sponsors in England than it is in Wales. So there's financial constraints that they've got, which is part of the problem. When they're not successful, they're going to find it harder to keep hold of those kids that having their eyes turned going to play football, and that's a big concern. But we have to have a strong Wales side, and the one glimmer of positivity for Welsh fans this weekend is at least they stopped the England under-20s winning the Grand Slam, and as a result they have a little bit of hope coming through the system. But It needs major overhaul, and it's not going to be an overnight fix. And that's the thing. Wales never want to be, well, really shouldn't be targeting just beating England every year. They should be competing to win the championship like they were in the glory years that we've already talked about.
Tell you what they need to do. England have pointed out the way. Just put as many fly halves and open side flankers in your team as you can, and you're sorted.
Great segue there, Tim, as well, to get us back onto England. I will just point out as well, I know plenty of people watching know that Wales have a director of rugby. We think that they're going to have to fill that role, and the head coach as well. Those two appointments are absolutely massive in terms of the game as a whole in Wales and this team specifically, so something to keep an eye on. You mentioned selection though, Tim. Talk to me about Borthwick's selection for this game, because there was only one recognised centre on the pitch, who they lost to an injury in Tommy Freeman. There were no recognised second rows on the bench, so Chandler Cunningham South had to play over a half of the game coming off and in the second row. And I was kind of thinking about this, and a lot of the reaction to his selection has been negative. Now, he's been justified by the result in itself, but more than that, and I know you watch a lot of South African rugby and follow the Springboks, and a big part of, I think, of what Rassie Erasmus has got so spot on with the Springboks, particularly in the last World Cup cycle, was developing the squad as a whole and having a squad capable of going to a World Cup and winning. And when I looked at that England selection, I just wondered whether there was a part of long-term planning for Steve Borthwick, of players having to problem solve, being out of position and being able to go and do a job. Now, I know that England, if they were playing away in Paris at the weekend, or if they were making the trip to Dublin, they probably wouldn't have selected that team. They were able to a degree, because they were playing a Welsh side not in a great place at the moment. But is there an element of it as well that this is long-term planning from Borthwick? This is Ben Earl could be popping up in the centres. This is players being able to jump around. And this is a squad that is capable of getting itself out of some tough situations.
Yeah, I think it's really fascinating when you look around world rugby, this concept of a hybrid player, which actually, fair play to him, Eddie Jones was kind of the first one on the case with that, when he was talking about Jack Nowell being a flanker and he mentioned Ben Earl being a centre. It seems to be a development, and I think I'm wondering where this could play out in the next couple of years. But to your point about South Africa, absolutely massive. They've got total confidence, 3-4 people in every position. You can put any one of those players in and the performance doesn't drop, and that is the benchmark. It's very un-Borthwick-like to have done what he's done. He always struck me as a guy that was like, win the next game and everything else will take care of itself. I do think some of those selections were with a longer term thinking in mind, which made me nervous as well before Wales, but was vindicated. And if he can have that, it just felt like there was a bit of swagger in the selection from him, which is very not Borthwick. And if he can have that kind of confidence and flex every now and again, just get that amount of energy on the pitch that you saw with all those back rows for England, and yeah, they could be cooking. But back to Ben's earlier point, don't read too much into one result against Wales. Long way to go.
But also on the selection, I think that's an amazing thing about this, is that Eddie Jones used to always speak about these things, but actually never really tended to do any of them. And Steve Borthwick, who we think of as a pragmatic, some people would say boring coach, I'm not saying that, but some people would level that at him, actually has been pretty bold and punchy in a lot of his selections. I think it's been pretty interesting from an England point of view. It's hard to pick out too many individual players, Ben, but there's a couple that I want to touch upon. First of all, Ben Curry, who has had to wait his time to get into this England team whilst he's seen his brother become one of the best players in the world. An exceptional Six Nations for Ben Curry and an exceptional performance in Cardiff.
I've always rated Ben Curry so highly. He always performs for Sale. You ask a lot of Sale fans and they think he's the better player. The great thing, I think, is that Tom Curry's had an awesome tournament as well. So I think Tom Curry's, for me, cemented himself in the Lions starting team. I think he's been outstanding. But Ben plays slightly differently, but has a lot of the same qualities, and just delighted to see him sort of step up and perform. And actually, he's another player that potentially you could stick him out in the centres and not a lot of change. And I don't think they will. I think you're going to sort of bank on one player. But the fact that the game's changed, and just to your point about Steve Borthwick's bold selection, I only think he's done a bold selection because Steve Borthwick looks at trends in games. He's so sort of he's very data orientated, and he does look at trends that you'll have noticed. Any team that he coaches, the drop goals sort of come back into fashion, and he's sort of just starting to build some ideas that he thinks, well, when teams have been successful, what have they done? And I reckon he will have got a bit of confidence to do what he did off the back of Fabien Galtier's selection against Ireland, and Jegu, who was outstanding when he came on in the centres. Obviously, they lost Dupont. They were only carrying Luku on the bench, and then so that lost him very early, and then so Jegu had to come on the centres very early. And there was one moment where he looked like a back rower defending in the centres, but he recovered the situation on his own. So he stepped in too much, but somehow he got back out and made a really good tackle. So I think when you see other teams doing things, it's the same with, how long ago? 4 years ago, we were saying, what's Rassie Erasmus doing? He's ruining the game, 6-2. Now everyone's got a 6-2 bench. It's trends that are successful for teams, and it's not that lot. We sort of say, is this a brand new thing? But there's been loads of players that have done it. I mean, Tom Young's played his first season at Leicester in the centres, and then moved to hooker, and Ashley Johnson for Wasps, back row, hooker. Lavani Bottia has been playing the centre 7 role for years, and actually Ben Earl started in the centres, didn't he? So it's not. Australia are a team that have always swapped players around in the back line and not worried about too much about what position they are, partly because they've got less playing numbers. But I think with the way the game's going now, and the sort of the roles of all the players needing to be able to handle and defend, and it's only really the first phase where it's a real problem. And I can see Borthwick now being emboldened to go, right, yeah, we'll do this more until someone tells us not to, or someone comes up with something that's a better way of doing things.
Tim, I want to move on to France, but another player for England that I wanted to mention, and there are loads we could go through here. I'm having to be selective, but Henry Pollock.
I knew you were going to say Henry Pollock.
Yeah,
I'm so glad you said Henry Pollock.
Of course I was. Go on.
I mentioned that I quite like the boldness and confidence in the selection of Borthwick. As Ben said, other people went there first, but he followed it. Henry Pollock's walking his own path, and he's not following anybody. And from his first Premiership game, England A, under-20s, wherever he plays, he just owns it. And everything that you're hearing from the England camp was that the night before he couldn't wait to get out there, and absolutely dominated. Even managed to wind up a British and Irish Lion experienced prop, Gareth Thomas, just tugging at his sock at the bottom of a ruck, just winding people up straight away. I love this kid.
Yeah, he's unreal. I mean, he's been so good for the under-20s, and everything you hear about him from Northampton is he's a top player, so highly rated. And again, I know Wales aren't in a great spot at the moment, but to come on 2 tries, just look to be absolutely revelling in the whole situation.
Yeah, if you had to sort of liken it to other sports, he's got a kind of, I don't know, like almost like a Floyd Mayweather type mentality. Just, he knows how good he is, and he's not afraid to just go out and express himself with it. I love the confidence.
I'll give you a different analogy. I think he's White Goodman from Dodgeball. You go and watch that film and tell me that he is not White Goodman's love child. But I agree. I love him. We want characters in the game. We want people that are, not afraid of celebrating what they're doing. And the only time that becomes a real bind is when you're not good enough to back it up. And God, everything that's been thrown at him, and people have said, haven't they, people watch the videos of him in the under-20s and celebrating, and they went, he won't be able to do that at Premiership level. Stepped into the Premiership and he's absolutely torn it apart this year. So, you deserve your shot, and he just looks like he's enjoying the game so much.
Well, I tell you what, Ben, with the dodgeball reference, I'm hoping the creative people here at talkSPORT, that's sorted out the thumbnail for them for this video, 100%. That's the task we'll set them. Right, let's move on. We'll do a report card for England in a bit, but on to France, the champions. Tim, not a grand slam, but it's one of the great championship victories without being a grand slam, if that makes sense and you know what I mean.
Yeah, I mean, straight away they'll be happy, relieved that they've got a championship. Only the second under Fabien Galtier. This crop of players has underperformed compared to the talent that they've got. I wonder how long it was after celebrating the victory, someone said, we should have had a Grand Slam. Because they're very rare and special, and they were good enough to, and they would argue they probably left one begging there.
Definitely.
So, yeah, no question. But the talent, and it's... England to a lesser extent, France even to a greater extent, the age profile of this team is they could be a serious force for a long, long time. And one of the biggest features of the French victory is, yes, they've got a load of experienced guys that are peaking or maybe just coming into their prime years, but it's guys like Boudehon and Jean-Baptiste Gros and Mo Afana, guys in their early to mid-20s who are just now, right, this shirt is mine, I've got it locked down, and you can imagine them getting better for the next couple of years. They're better now than they were in their home World Cup in 2023.
Oh, big shout. What, already, you reckon?
Well, no, I just think the guys that were there, like Louis Bielbiere 2 years ago, he was a kid completely fresh to it. Now he
was their World Cup bolter.
He's one of the best wingers in the world. I just look at the French team and they've got an identity. The way that they mould it with Miafu and these big units coming on, and then they're supplementing that with the French flair that they've got. They kind of know what they are. I think maybe the pain of that South Africa defeat, and they took a while for them to get over it. Maybe I think they're coming out the other side now and looking really good.
Yeah, I wonder whether that game at Twickenham was a bit of a line in the sand for them, where you feel like they kind of got together after that and said, right, this is our identity and we're moving forward, whereas they did have the World Cup hanging over them before that. Ben, I suppose, and Tim's touched on it there, that the talent in this French team is undeniable. And I think when they previously won a Grand Slam under Galtier, many of us would have expected them to go on and dominate. They still went on and they beat the All Blacks. And look, they lost the World Cup quarter-final at home by a point to the eventual winners. It could have gone either way. But even so, I feel there's often been a sense of there could be more from this team. Is that the challenge for them? Is that the next step for this team, to really go on and dominate, maybe in the way we've kind of seen Ireland do over the last few years?
Yeah, I think they're a very different French side from historically, where you'd sort of say there were peaks and troughs and games they should have won, they didn't. And that's happened this year. They should have beaten England 100%, and that's some mistakes. But you also learn from those mistakes, and they've got a decent run up to the next World Cup to do that. I think the thing that impresses me, there's a couple of things that impress me so much about them. First of all, and Tim's already said about the physicality, that's sort of a given with the size of French packs. I think the big thing though is, and I said this before the Ireland game, I said Ireland could win 70 minutes of that game, and then in 10 minutes France could just cut them apart and win. And that's that they're almost like New Zealand teams of old, that even if you're playing really, really well against them, they still have that in the back of their mind, that confidence that we just need two opportunities and then we'll rip this team apart, and that's a really scary. So pace, the amount of pace they've got is frightening across the board. But secondly, the strength and depth of so many positions, and none more so obvious than when Dupont goes down, Luca comes on, looks like one of the best players in the tournament. So and they've got much more behind Luca as well. So and they've got that in so many positions. That big bench that come on and add so much power. Not many teams have got that size of front line and bench to come on and make a difference as well. So they're a scary prospect. They're probably the richest sort of sport rugby nation around. So, and they are producing big numbers. The game's hugely popular. They're bringing in communities in France that were never into rugby, which gives you, a new genetic pool to come in as well. So I think France are here for the long term, backed by decent finances, a huge pool of players to choose from, and success to drive it that they can follow in behind.
Just finally, which we should cover actually on this game, was the Malvaca incident. Was he lucky to not pick up a red card? And where does it leave us? I think the conversation is wider than just this incident. It is a conversation about the bunker system and what's a
What,
red.
what do you
and
need
what's
to
not.
do to get a red card? What do you need to do to get a full red card now? I don't know what you would actually have to do now, because it seems like you hit the yellow card threshold. Referees they've obviously been told, because Matthew Carley is like the biggest stickler for process. He knows every law inside out. He's almost like a kind of school teacher in his manner, and he's obviously been told, if it's a yellow card threshold, send it to the bunker and they'll do the rest. But with that process, I now don't know what you have to do to get a full red card. They've introduced this 20-minute red card, but yeah, I don't get it. Benny, you're sat there in the commentary booth. You get to hear the TMOs and you get to speak with the referees before and after games. What's going on?
So I think this incident has highlighted a couple of problems. You're right, and I've been an advocate of the 20-minute card for accidental stuff. But the biggest mistake World Rugby have made is they've called it a red card. Or they haven't changed and brought, they haven't said, okay, well, this is the red card and we'll bring in a black card for foul play. But, I for years I've been saying we should have an orange card, completely accidental, remove the player so that, that's made the mistake, so that he's punished, but don't punish the spectacle. But we were told that there was still going to be a full red card, and that's too confusing. You can't have a red card that means one thing and a red card that means another. Even for the referees that know the process, surely that must affect them a little bit, sort of, in the subconscious, that, well, I just do my job and I send it off. We have to be able to clamp out. The other issue that it's brought about is the difference in replays that teams get when they're in France and when they're in other places. Because I'm pretty sure, and actually in this instance, I think it's probably counted against the French, because I'm pretty sure the TMO has seen different angles than got put on the telly. And if he has done, he must be convinced that there wasn't head contact. The only angle we've seen is from behind of Malvaca, and it looks, for all intents and purposes, like he must have made contact, but we don't actually see the contact. Now, he will have had an option to look at all the other angles in the bunker, but no one else has seen that. So we can't say, oh, now it makes sense. It was reckless. He dived in, a bit like, someone swings a punch but misses. It's probably only going to be a yellow card. But that's the problem. Because we don't tend to, whenever the French do anything naughty, we don't tend to see replays of it. We're all left wondering now. But if that's head connection, 100% it's a red card. And I know it's not a tackle, so it doesn't go into the framework of, was the head contact, was it foul play? It was a deliberate act off the ball after the whistle had gone. But from the other angle, it might have looked almost like a tackle, because he swung his arms, he has wrapped his arms around, almost like diving on top of someone to have a wrestle or whatever. But because of the TV coverage, we've got no idea. So for all of us watching at home, we go, how come someone can do a flying headbutt and not get sent off properly?
And also it was off the ball, and it seemed like they were treating it with the kind of normal high tackle framework. When
the mitigation, it says in World Rugby's law, mitigation does not apply for acts that are always illegal.
Yeah. And the other thing as well, Ben, is you saying, and it is you're absolutely right. It's often a thing in France. We don't always get the right replays. Like, I'm sorry, that is utterly ridiculous on how that can even be a situation, that a TV director or whoever it is in whatever country it is can control the replays that certain people get and certain people see, and all of a sudden, like, how amateur does that sound?
Well, it happened for the disallowed try, which, I mean, I've been told by people that say they have seen the clip that Kinghorn's elbow was in touch.
I've seen it.
Didn't see it.
Yeah, but I agree totally. I had to slow it down and press pause on the TV footage, because no one was going to show us the actual angle, just in case it wasn't right.
Yeah, absolutely mad. Let's get on to some of our kind of school report cards for each team. We haven't done anything on Italy, Ireland yet. The nature of the way the fixtures fell, I suppose, means because they went first, it was quickly out of date in terms of the championship. Should we start with Italy, lads, and kind of their Six Nations, our school report for them? I've actually given each team a grade. I've given Italy a C. And what I got only the one win and less competitive overall than last year, which admittedly was a great Six Nations for Italy. It felt to me, Tim, like they just struggled for consistency in the way that they were able to achieve that last year. And I know that was something that Gonzalo Quesada was saying at Twickenham in the press conference afterwards. I think that's been pretty key for Italy.
It was kind of the inverse of how Ben described France. They put all this work in and then they just go soft and erratic for 10 minutes and the game is gone. Their trend is upwards over the long term, but it's disappointing given how well they did last year. So yeah, I was like in the C minus range as well.
Ben, you agree?
I just think they're not as good as they were last year, but they're so far on from where they were 8 years ago, and that's what we were all crying out for. No one's talking about relegation anymore now. It's Wales, are they? but do you know what I mean? We were all saying, Italy are never going to win games. They're never, and they are so much better than they were. So it took them so long to take that leap to that level, but it's going to take a little bit longer for them to get to the next level where they get that 80-minute consistency performance. I will say, I think Menoncello's nailed on for the Lions, though. Oh, if he is available.
He is world 15 levels right now, isn't he? If he was a South African, New Zealander, English, he would be like one of the faces of the game. What a player!
Yeah. So
totally.
So positives, real positives, but I think there's also that element of disappointment that I think they, after last year, but it's not, it's very rare that anything's improvement is linear. You go up and down. Think of it like stocks and shares. They go up and down, but over time they keep growing. I think Italy are in that position at the moment.
Tim, do you want to get on to Ireland? Summarise their kind of Six Nations report. They're an interesting one, I think.
It is, and I think that there's a bit of recency bias. People will sort of inflate how good England are, and it'll all be total doom and gloom for Ireland. There's no question, the age profile of the team, they need a little bit of a turnover. A Lions year is a good year to do that. They've got a summer tour where they can get those young guys about. They've had a few key men missing in big games. Andy Farrell hasn't been there. It was only 8 months ago they were beating South Africa in South Africa, and they have been consistently one of, and at times, the best team in the world. So I'm not going to join the doom mongers to the degree that many are at the minute. Although, if there is a trend, you could imagine, to Ben's point, it could be a gradual downward trend until reinforcements arrive.
With Ireland, for me, I felt that, in a way, Ben, I think this is a good time for them to have this very slight dip. And I agree with you, Tim, in that 2 games ago, Ireland were still on for a second Grand Slam in 3 years, a third title in a row, completely unprecedented.
20 minutes into the France game, if you'd have sort of said, right, give me your assessment of Ireland, you'd be like, oh yeah, well, Grand Slam winners, they're going to be all right.
Yeah, exactly. And so overall, I think it's still pretty good, despite the fact that they finished third. But Ben, I feel like it's a good time for them to have this dip, in that you're right between World Cup cycles. We often see it, don't we, that for teams to maintain the very, very highest level of performance is not easy. And that was always the thing with Ireland. Like, the stereotype with Ireland was they peak in between World Cups. They've almost got these couple of years now to build back up again, still with the core of this team that will be there at the next World Cup.
Yeah, I do agree with that. I think their invincibility cloak has slipped slightly. They in terms of their own belief in themselves, there were tough games that you just felt, they'll stay in it right to the end. They'll cut. Whatever happens, Ireland are going to come out on top, and I don't think that's there anymore. I think a huge factor in that was obviously Sexton going, that drove so much of it drove so much of the belief on the field. They haven't worked out that problem yet. Prendergast at times looks really good, but he's not the sort of complete article yet. But he probably will be. Crowley, sort of who's ahead in the pecking order at the moment. I think you're right. The fact that there's no tour. Or there is a tour, but it's almost like a development tour, and it's a Lions tour this year, will help a lot of the team you'd expect will go away on the Lions tour. So almost the opposite of England, where England almost want their players to stay together in the summer and back up the momentum they had at the end of the tournament. Like, it it might be a good thing that they're not, and there's a bit of focus on those younger players coming through, because that's going to be crucial. I haven't seen anywhere near as much talent coming through as when the last lot of players of their legends started to retire, the likes of Heaslip and that ilk. I haven't seen yet people appearing on the scene that I go, yeah, they're ready to step into the shoes. So this tour's massive for them coming up. I think the other thing is that will be crucial is how well Leinster do towards the back end of the season. Obviously, with so many Leinster players, if Leinster dominate in Europe and have a really good end to the season, I think people will say, actually, those players can still win. If Leinster have a bit of a shocker, it'll tarnish a lot of things that Alan wants to do, and people will go, maybe this is a team on the slide.
Yeah, interesting. France, Tim, for France, I give them France an A, not an A+, just because they didn't do the Grand Slam.
Yeah, and I gave them a B+. So
interesting.
For the same reason, that when you look across the team, and they will be kicking themselves for that, and also that, you know, they were one of 3 teams that won 4 of their matches. I just see, as we've already touched on with France, an identity and a really irresistible combination of absolute brutishness and complete raw pace. And to Ben's point about Ireland, there is no shortage of guys that are 19, 20, 21, 22 that are tearing it up in the top 14 and just waiting for their opportunity.
And Ben, we've already done a fair bit on England as well, but I almost had them a similar grade to France, even though they didn't win the title. I think they surpassed plenty of expectations, and I suppose more importantly than anything, you feel like for the first time under Steve Borthwick, this is potentially a really positive platform to build upon. Like, if you remember him coming into the job in 2023, it was about the World Cup. It was short-term fixes. Then at the end of the World Cup, they lost a lot of experience, a lot of caps went out of that team, and they've kind of been rebuilding and growing the depth since then. It feels to me like this is the first time where you're looking at the Steve Borthwick England team and thinking that they've given themselves a really, really good platform to build upon here.
Yeah, agree with that. And I guess if we're the headmaster, we've given a B+ to France as a bit of a kick up the backside, but in the mocks before you get to your main exams, because the ceiling for France is so high. And we're sort of like, come on, lads, you're not quite putting the effort in yet. Whereas England, you've almost given them the B+ to reward them for how much they've improved. So I wouldn't put England at the same level as France at the moment, despite them both winning 4 games and England coming out on top in that game. Having said that, I think it is a massive improvement with England, particularly in the last 2 games, and that recency bias thing sort of comes into effect there. But certain players that were off a bit just starting to look good. I think, you know, the front row have been outstanding in the last couple of weeks. Will Stewart's someone that's shocked me with the player that he's become at international level. I didn't think he was going to be that quality of international player. And then the other thing that I like about England is they've done what France have done over the years, which is pick players that play together in the same system, and obviously Leinster and Ireland have done it as well. Play well together in the same system and then try and play that system. And those Northampton players that are settling in to the style of rugby that's going to lead. And that's often the case, you know, when the Leicester players put the most of the players in, you obviously do more of what Leicester do. When Wasps came along, we started to do more of what Wasps did. And I'm sure it's the same with Saracens when they were dominating. So I think when you have a style that you can get behind and players that are used to, it's really easy to put the odd bit of stardust in there. And, you know, be that Roebuck who came in and looked really, really good. I think the biggest loss for England, but actually it's probably really good for him with what's happening in the summer, was Furbank. I think he could have been the final piece to the jigsaw for the attacking play. I know Marcus Smith debate will rage on, but I think Furbank at 15 in that England back line, and they're starting to
And
look like
Faye Boso back as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So there's,
Awesome.
there's a lot of positivity moving forward, and we are so much more positive than we were after the Scotland game.
I really, really want to get onto our awards. So quickly for Scotland and Wales. Tim, I've given Scotland a C. Look, they were a conversion away from beating England, and their Six Nations looks very, very different. That's the nature of the championship. It's why we love it. I also just think there's a question of has the window closed for Scotland? Has their championship window closed? And then for Wales, I've given them an F. I think it's disingenuous to... It would be disingenuous to treat it as anything else. It's not all the players' faults. There are wider issues in the game in Wales, but you have to fail them, I think, for that. Either of you guys any different to those two?
I'll go along with you on Scotland. I will just say, without their captain talisman and attacking focus, their attack was still fantastic. They shredded England. They got double the number of attacking metres than France. They were in France's 22 a lot. They just couldn't convert. So they're still doing a lot of really good things, but it's not complete. And on Wales, and just to go back to Benny's school headmaster thing, my kids, when they get reports from school, they have an effort grade and an attainment grade. And the one I always look at, and if I ever had to have words with them, it's if the effort grade wasn't there. Wales are getting an F, but that's the best that set of players are capable of getting right now, sad as it is to say.
I just mentioned...
All right, well, we'll leave our...
The only thing I just want to mention, Jack Morgan, who has been unbelievable in a team that's going through so much turmoil. So to put in the level of performance he does every week, and he is very, very much in contention for the starting Lions jersey.
Yep, I would agree with that. Let's move on to our awards to finish off then. This is what producer Jamie has given us to get through. Best player, first of all. I reckon... Feels obvious to me, but we might differ. Tim?
Yeah, I'll leave you to say the obvious ones. I'll give a little mention for Francois Cross, who I think was awesome, but I'd go for Tom Curry. Just the story, what he's been through, a bit sentimental on my part maybe with the hip. I wondered whether he'd ever be properly playing for England again, and to absolutely dominate and be one of the best players week in, week out across the full 5 games is remarkable. And the fact he gets to do it now with his twin brother, just a cherry on top of the cake. So I'll give a shout for Tom Curry for best player.
Yeah, that was one of the names I had written down. Ben, what do you reckon?
Easy for me, Louis Biarri, who absolute superstar in the making. Love to see him sort of in a game against the Springboks, and to have both him and Cheslin Colby on the field together be pretty special.
Yeah, well, those are the two names that I had written down, was Biarri and Tom Curry. And, the Frenchman try-scoring record, so young, gives pace that would terrify any team. And I echo what you said, Tim. Tom Curry is just a beast, like hard as nails. And the fact that his injury and what he's been through in the hip and all that stuff, he had a brilliant Six Nations. Biggest breakthrough? Ben, who stands out here for you?
There's 2 for me, and I'm really... really struggling. I think Blair Murray has been outstanding in adding a bit of positivity, but I'm actually going to give it...
Does he get on the Lions tour? Just quickly, Ben.
As a bolter, yeah, I think he goes on the tour, or it's easy to say that, isn't it?
Because the fullback options aren't too obvious, are they?
He's still got to perform, but certainly he deserves a shot, yeah. So he is definitely... in the mix, and as you said, I think Blair Kinghorn's been good. As I said, I think Furbank coming back will mean that he's in contention as well, and obviously Hugo Keenan. So it's not a nailed-on certainty, but he's certainly given himself the best shot from a standing start of being right at the back of the field. And then the other one's Jordan. I think we all thought Tui Pelotto was such a huge loss, and he's been outstanding as a guy that only made his debut in the autumn. So yeah, it's a tough one. I know he's scored a hell of a lot of tries, because he wasn't in my fantasy team and he was in a couple of the rest of my family. So he's been, but he's looked the part. But I'm gonna give it to Blair Murray.
Tim?
Are we classifying Breakthrough as this is their first tournament?
Well, I think it's open to interpretation. So I've got
Okay.
I've got a name that we've seen before, but maybe kind of broke through this championship. So it's up to you.
Yeah. Well. Yeah. Well, on that basis, despite the fact he's now got 36 caps to his name, Yoram Moefana has just stepped out of the shadows. I always thought there was a bit of a question mark on that 12 position for France ever since Danty was a declining force and they tried to put Fickou there and was that going to work? He's been there for a while now and he's played a lot of test matches, but a lot of them off the bench. What a tournament that guy's had. And yeah, talking about matchups that I want to see. Yeah, Colby against BLBRA, but Dialende opposite Moefana could be dynamite.
Yeah, great one. And I absolutely agree that the 12 France when they were at their best was when Danty was playing really well for them. I think they've struggled to replace him. Moefana's been brilliant. I had two names. I had Sam Prendergast, who's come in and had a mixed bag, but had some pretty impressive moments as well for a young guy at fly half. And then the other one, in terms of a player we have seen before but not too much of, is actually the other Curry, and Ben Curry, who I think has played his way into potentially getting on the Lions tour, despite how competitive the whole of the back row is. So any of those guys really, I think, have had pretty good championships. Outside shot of making the Lions, talking of Lions tour. So I had Blair Murray down for this. I also had Finn Smith, who I think, having come in and got the fly half jersey for England, are the two names that I've got written down. What say you?
Well, open to interpretation.
I'll tell you one that I've got written down.
Oh, go on then, you go.
Oh, go on, Ben. Go on, Ben. You go for it.
I was just going to say it's open to interpretation by, we're saying outside for a starting spot in the first test, or there are people that probably you thought might have made the tour. So I am going to go for someone that I've already mentioned, and that is Will Stewart. Because before the tournament, I got asked by the Lions, who's nailed on to start at tight head for you? Start at who's the first name on the team sheet? And I said Tadhg Furlong. And I know he's been injured most of the tournament, got back, came off the bench. Looked like he's carrying a bit of weight, actually, a bit more weight, which is understandable when you haven't been running around for a while. But I still think he's favourite to start there. And obviously Xander Fagerson will have something to say about it as well. But I didn't think Will Stewart was a contender to play in Alliance Test team, and now I firmly do. I think he's been outstanding. His scrummaging's been good. I think he credits a lot of that with working with some of the South Africans at Bath, but God, his footwork and his ball carrying has been absolutely outstanding. And quite often, that Lions conversation, selection conversation, is just about people that peak at the right time in their career, and he seems to be doing that.
I did actually have Will Stewart on one of the ones. Will Stewart and Genge as a pair, as a breakthrough, because England's scrum being a Achilles heel is now a strength. I totally agree with that. Outside shot, I've taken this right. Let's throw a little bit of a curveball. What could potentially happen? And I've written down George Ford or Owen Farrell, from the perspective that with all these young fly halves that you're not totally sure, Finn Smith hasn't been properly tested, at the very highest level. Marcus Smith hasn't been able to pin down his shirt. Sam Prendergast, Crowley are fighting over it. Could Andy Farrell be tempted to take someone with around about or over 100 caps of experience, been on tours before, that kind of thing? I would love him to take his boy Owen. I just wonder, George Ford, when he came on, I thought had a brilliant cameo for England. And so I'd say that those would be a couple of outside shots.
I love the Ford shout, and I have felt this Six Nations because of the uncertainty around the 10s, and is Finn Russell and Andy Farrell 10? Should Ford not be in the conversation more? So I love that you stuck him there. Just one other name to throw at you, which is really left field, and I'm not sure even I believe it, but let's have a bit of fun, has Emmanuel Faye-Weboso's case been strengthened, in that I look at the wings for the Lions, and where is the out-and-out pace? Now, his injury means he's basically not going to play until the tour, so it's really unlikely he goes. But outside of maybe a Darcy Graham, I look at a lot of the wingers and I think, where's the serious blistering pace in there? And I just wonder whether that could be in his favour because of what he brings. But as I say, his injury makes it difficult. Really quickly, fellas, because we've got to finish off here. Biggest or favourite moment? I've gone for England beating France at Twickenham.
I'll go for that Louis Bielbiere try against Ireland. Ramos in his own 22, little grubber through, counter ruck, Penno doing Penno things, the kick through. That was just rugby from the gods. So that was the highlight of the tournament for me.
I'll go for Wales's biggest ever loss in Cardiff. I'm sorry to do it to you Welsh fans, but I just think, from where England were, after that Scotland game, and Ellis Genge complaining that we weren't all patting them on the back enough when they'd won a game, to that performance is a whole different kettle of fish, and gave the country a massive boost.
Well, that's what I've got for my most shocking moment. That's our final award, Tim.
Yeah, for that it was hearing Swing Low Sweet Chariot in Cardiff and England fans waving goodbye to the streams of Welsh fans exiting the stadium. That was the most shocking moment for me.
I want to know what you've gone for, Ben, as most shocking moment. If the England-Wales match, I suppose it can be that as well, to be fair.
No, it's not. My most shocking moment was France's exit when running back under massive pressure. Ramos threw the offload blind on his own line, and then the crossfield kick that blatantly didn't go where it was meant to go, and then they cleared their lines from Bielbiere. So that was just nuts, and just summed up like France's confidence. Like, which other team, sort of tier one team in world rugby, would be doing that on their own line? And it's probably a good thing and a bad thing. They've got the confidence to do it, but it still makes you think they're mad enough to lose the game in an instant like that. So, but I was in commentary, and I think if you listen in the background, you can hear my surprise being picked up on the microphone.
Well, I reckon that's a pretty
You
good
Gary
place.
Neville it. You Gary Neville it with the Torres goal.
Yeah.
I reckon that's a pretty good place to leave it, gents. Ben, Tim, pleasure as always. We'll have to get back together and pick our Lions team fairly soon, I reckon. But appreciate you joining me once again. Thanks very much for watching talkSPORT Rugby. Leave us a comment down below, particularly any of the awards. Who would you give it to? Like the video as well, and make sure you're subscribed. Thanks for watching.